It began with a phrase no one expected to hear from Princess Charlotte, quiet, firm, and devastating in its innocence. "I choose my mother's crown over Camilla's," insiders claim she said. And within hours, the whisper had moved from a private family room to the deepest corridors of the palace, turning one child's alleged choice into a royal storm about blood, duty, and legacy. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Reports suggest the moment unfolded during a private discussion about Charlotte's future ceremonial place inside the monarchy. The kind of conversation usually wrapped in careful language, soft smiles, and strict palace discipline. It was not meant to become a scandal. It was not meant to leave the room. But according to those familiar with the atmosphere, one innocent sentence changed everything. Because Charlotte's alleged words did not sound like childish defiance. They sounded like instinct. They sounded like loyalty. And that is what made them so dangerous. Catherine, insiders claim, was stunned into silence. Not because Charlotte had spoken against anyone directly, but because the emotional meaning behind the remark was impossible to miss. A daughter had recognized the pressure around her mother. A young princess, raised beneath the weight of history, had somehow understood that crowns are not only worn on state occasions, they are carried in sacrifice, patience, humiliation, discipline, and years of silent endurance. To Charlotte, Catherine's crown was not simply future jewelry. It was the symbol of the woman who had protected her, guided her, and stood steady while the palace around her shifted. But Camilla's circle reportedly heard something very different. To them, the alleged phrase felt like rejection. A sharp and humiliating line drawn between the queen consort's present authority and Catherine's rising future. Palace aides, sensing the danger, allegedly tried to cool the story before it spread any further, describing it as a misunderstood family moment. Nothing more than an emotional phrase taken out of context. Yet the harder they tried to soften it, the louder the whisper became. William, according to palace insiders, moved immediately to shield Charlotte from the storm. He understood what could happen if adults turned a child's alleged words into a weapon. He had lived through royal conflict before. He knew how quickly affection could be twisted into politics, and how easily a young royal could be pulled into battles she never chose. So, behind closed doors, William's priority was not punishment, not confrontation, not public denial. It was protection. Still, the damage had already been done. Because the phrase revealed something the palace had long tried to hide, Catherine's future crown was beginning to carry more emotional power than Camilla's current position. What Charlotte allegedly said became bigger than one child, bigger than one room, bigger than one private family exchange. It became the first sign of a new generational loyalty forming around Catherine. Quietly, but unmistakably, as if the future monarchy had already chosen its center before anyone dared to announce it. But the chilling truth wasn't just about a child's preference, it was about which woman the future of the monarchy was beginning to follow. In the House of Windsor, a crown is never just gold, jewels, or ceremony. It is memory. It is legitimacy. It is the silent language of who belongs and who merely arrived. And when Charlotte's alleged words placed Catherine's crown above Camilla's, it struck something far deeper than family tension. It touched the sacred machinery of succession itself. Because inside royal life, every symbol carries weight. A glance can become a message. A seating position can become a warning. A jewel can become a declaration. And a child's alleged reference to her mother's crown was never going to be treated as a simple family phrase. Not when Catherine stands as the future queen. Not when Charlotte is being raised inside the very line that will one day define the monarchy's survival. To the outside world, Mother's crown may sound emotional, even innocent, but within palace walls, it reportedly landed like a coded announcement. Charlotte's loyalty was not drifting toward the present court around Camilla. It was anchored firmly in the future court of Catherine. That distinction mattered. Catherine's rise has been slow, patient, and punishing. She did not enter the monarchy-demanding space. She learned its silences, its rules, its hidden tests, and its unforgiving expectations. She absorbed criticism, carried pressure, and built trust through restraint. Camilla's journey, by contrast, has always carried a complicated shadow, one shaped by public suspicion, painful memory, and years of debate over acceptance. Supporters may argue she earned her place through endurance, but insiders whisper that Charlotte's alleged phrase reopened the one wound the palace has never fully sealed: the difference between being crowned by ceremony and being embraced by legacy. Royal children are taught these differences early. They learn who walks first, who bows, who speaks, who waits, and who carries the future without ever saying it aloud. Reports suggest Charlotte has watched Catherine closely at major royal moments, studying not only her mother's posture, but her discipline. Palace observers have allegedly noticed it for years: the calm expression, the careful timing, the instinct to stand still when others shift. Some called it training, others called it inheritance. But after the alleged statement, it began to look like something even stronger: emotional allegiance. And that is why Camilla's supporters reportedly grew uneasy. If Charlotte's words spread, they feared it would not merely flatter Catherine. It would remind the public that the monarchy's deepest legitimacy does not always follow titles in the present. Sometimes, it gathers around the person people believe represents tomorrow. The crown, then, became a battlefield not between two women shouting across a room, but between inherited duty and acquired influence. Between the monarchy that exists now and the monarchy already taking shape in silence. Yet behind the symbolism, insiders claim there was a specific palace concern, one that placed Camilla much closer to Charlotte's future than Catherine was willing to accept. Reports suggest Camilla had not openly demanded influence over Charlotte, but in royal life, power rarely announces itself. It arrives through seating charts, ceremonial advice, private lunches, and helpful guidance. And according to palace whispers, Catherine began to notice a pattern: Charlotte was being gently drawn toward a courtly orbit that did not belong to her mother. At first, the gestures seemed harmless. An invitation here, a suggested placement there, a gentle comment about where Charlotte might stand, which senior royal she might accompany, which traditions she should begin to understand more closely. Nothing explosive enough to trigger open confrontation, but enough, insiders claim, to make Catherine pause. Because Catherine knew the palace did not always move through grand declarations. Sometimes it moved through quiet arrangements, through polite suggestions that slowly became expectations, through courtesies that later hardened into precedent. Camilla's household, according to palace whispers, wanted a warmer public association with Charlotte, a softer image, a bridge between the queen consort and the next generation. To Camilla's defenders, this was not a power play. They allegedly insisted it was unity, a way of showing that the family could heal old wounds and present itself as whole. But Catherine's circle reportedly saw a more complicated picture. They feared Charlotte was being positioned as a symbol, gently drawn into a narrative that could make Camilla appear more central to the future monarchy than the Wales household was willing to allow. And that is where the tension sharpened. Catherine was not merely protecting a daughter. She was protecting a line of inheritance, a future identity, and the emotional foundation of a young princess who would grow up beneath ruthless public attention. William, insiders suggest, saw it through the same unforgiving lens. He understood that Charlotte's future ceremonial role had to be shaped with care, not borrowed by any faction seeking warmth, legitimacy, or influence. The monarchy could survive many things, but it could not allow a child's loyalty to become a palace trophy. Behind closed doors, the situation reportedly earned a quiet name among aides: the Crown Preference Divide. It was not written into official documents, not announced, not admitted, but those close to the atmosphere understood what it meant. On one side stood Camilla's present rank, and her desire to be accepted as a steady matriarchal figure. On the other stood Catherine's future crown, supported by William's protection and Charlotte's instinctive devotion. The conflict was not loud, but it was dangerous because it touched the oldest royal question of all: who truly shapes the next generation? And then came the private moment that transformed suspicion into shock, because Charlotte's alleged words did what no adult in the palace dared to do. Those familiar with the moment say Catherine did not immediately speak. She simply looked at Charlotte, and in that silence, the palace understood something terrifying. This was not coached, calculated, or political. It was emotional truth. A daughter had seen the pressure surrounding her mother and had chosen, without hesitation, the crown she believed carried dignity. For Catherine, insiders suggest, the shock was not rooted in pride alone. It was fear. Not fear of Camilla, not fear of court gossip, but fear that Charlotte had accidentally stepped into a conflict far older, colder, and more ruthless than any child should have to understand. Because the moment those alleged words left her mouth, they no longer belonged only to Charlotte. They became material for interpretation. They became a signal for courtiers, a wound for rivals, and a possible weapon for anyone inside the palace who knew how to turn innocence into influence. Catherine's reaction, according to palace whispers, was restrained but deeply protective. She did not rush to celebrate the loyalty behind the phrase. She did not allow the room to turn it into a victory. Instead, she reportedly understood the danger immediately. Charlotte could be blamed for a division she had not created, accused of disrespect she had not intended, or placed at the center of a battle between two royal women when all she had done was speak from the heart. And that was what made Catherine's silence so powerful. It was not weakness. It was control. William allegedly moved quickly, sensing the same threat. He redirected the conversation, shifted the focus away from Charlotte, and made it clear, without needing theatrical outrage, that his daughter would not be examined like evidence in a palace inquiry. Those close to the Wales household suggest this was the moment William's protective instincts hardened into something more formal. He had watched the monarchy consume private pain before. He had seen family fracture beneath public duty. And now, with Charlotte standing unknowingly near the edge of that same machine, he refused to let history repeat itself. After the meeting, aides reportedly noticed a change in Catherine. Her composure remained perfect, but it carried a sharper edge. The warmth was still there, yet beneath it was a new firmness, the kind that appears when a mother realizes the battle has reached too close to her child. The phrase began to travel because the adults in that room understood its meaning. Charlotte was not attacking Camilla. She was defending Catherine. She was naming, in the simplest possible way, the crown she trusted, the woman she believed in, and the future she instinctively recognized as her own. And that is why Catherine's mother's crown became more than a phrase. It became a moral symbol of patience, sacrifice, and respect earned without force. But once William heard how the remark was being interpreted outside that room, the issue stopped being emotional and became constitutional. Prince William's response, insiders claim, was not loud, but it was final. Charlotte was not to become a token in anyone's campaign for acceptance, sympathy, or palace dominance. The future king had watched enough wounds pass from one generation to the next. This time, he would not allow the monarchy's private fractures to be placed on his daughter's shoulders. According to palace whispers, William understood the danger faster than anyone else in the room. A child's alleged words had already been pulled into a battle of meaning, and if he did not act quickly, Charlotte's innocence could be buried beneath adult ambition. So his response was measured, controlled, and unmistakably firm. Reports suggest he made it clear that Charlotte's ceremonial guidance, public positioning, and future royal training would remain firmly inside the Wales household. Not because he wanted conflict, not because he wished to embarrass Camilla, but because the line of succession could not become a battlefield for emotional validation. Behind the scenes, palace administrative streams allegedly began reviewing upcoming appearances, seating arrangements, family groupings, and ceremonial expectations involving Charlotte. Nothing was announced. No dramatic decree was placed before the public. But in royal life, the strongest messages are often written in the quietest adjustments. A changed placement, a revised invitation, a softened role, a careful distance. To Camilla's circle, insiders claim these moves felt like exclusion, a cold reminder that the Queen's household could not automatically reach into the Wales children's future. But to William's side, it was not exclusion at all. It was protection. Catherine reportedly supported the decision while refusing to turn it into open confrontation. That restraint mattered. She knew that if she appeared triumphant, the story would become cruel. If she appeared wounded, it would become weakness. So she remained composed, allowing William to draw the boundary while she carried the emotional weight behind it. And according to those familiar with the mood, William invoked what some began calling future crown discipline, the principle that the next generation must be shaped by duty, stability, and the direct line of inheritance, not by shifting palace loyalties. Soon, the phrase Charlotte chooses Catherine allegedly became a shorthand among insiders for something much larger than one private remark. It suggested that the emotional center of the monarchy was changing. The palace could still honor Camilla's title, still respect her place beside King Charles, still maintain the public image of unity. But the deeper current was moving elsewhere toward Catherine, toward William, toward the children who would carry the crown into the next era. And with that, a new boundary appeared between the Queen's household and the Wales children, silent but powerful, fragile but necessary. Yet no boundary inside the monarchy can hold unless the old guard accepts it, and that is when the senior guardians of royal protocol began to move. When whispers reach the old guard, they do not explode, they harden into paperwork. Reports suggest Princess Anne and Prince Edward were quietly informed that Charlotte's alleged statement had become more than a family discomfort. It was now a question of training, succession, and symbolic loyalty. And in the monarchy, symbolism is never harmless. To Anne, insiders claim, this was never about hurt feelings or palace favoritism. It was about duty. The iron-willed princess has long been seen as one of the monarchy's sternest guardians, someone who understands that royal survival depends not on emotion, but on discipline, precedent, and the protection of the line. So when the alleged phrase began moving through private circles, Anne reportedly did not treat it as gossip. She treated it as a warning. If Charlotte's future role could be shaped by competing household influence now, then the foundation of the next reign could become vulnerable before it even began. Prince Edward, quieter but no less careful, allegedly examined the matter through the lens of protocol. Not scandal, not personality, protocol. Because the Wales children are not ordinary grandchildren moving through a family dispute. They are part of the monarchy's living architecture. And every lesson, every appearance, every ceremonial habit becomes part of how the public understands the future crown. Reports suggest Edward's concern was not whether Camilla felt excluded, but whether Charlotte's development remained clear, stable, and loyal to the direct line that would one day carry the institution forward. And over all of it, Queen Elizabeth II's legacy was said to hang like an unseen command. Her reign had been built on restraint, order, and the belief that the crown must never be treated as personal property. The Red Box, letters patent, royal household precedent, these were not just old tools of administration. In moments like this, they became sacred anchors. They reminded the family that affection may shift, alliances may tremble, but the monarchy survives only when duty remains stronger than desire. That is when insiders say an unofficial doctrine began to take shape. The Charlotte Crown Line. Its meaning was simple, but devastating. The Wales children would answer to the future crown, not to competing circles of influence. Their training, their symbolism, and their public identity would remain rooted in William and Catherine's household. To Catherine's supporters, this strengthened the monarchy. To Camilla's allies, it allegedly felt like a quiet eclipse, proof that Catherine's emotional authority was beginning to outshine the Queen Consort's present rank. The old guard's position, however, was firm. Charlotte's loyalty to her mother was not a threat. It was a sign that the next generation recognized steadiness, sacrifice, and earned respect when it saw it. But what wounded Camilla most was not the paperwork, it was the sudden realization that the palace had begun to treat Catherine as the emotional queen-in-waiting. For Camilla, the alleged sentence landed like an invisible demotion. No announcement was made, no title was removed, no public rebuke was issued. But inside the palace, the consequence was colder than ceremony. Charlotte's future image would be shaped beside Catherine, not beneath Camilla's shadow. And everyone understood what that meant. Reports suggest Camilla felt the sting not because a child had spoken cruelly, but because the interpretation of those words cut directly into the question she had spent years trying to settle: had the monarchy truly accepted her, or merely adjusted around her? To the public, she still held rank. She still appeared beside King Charles. She still occupied the place history had finally granted her. Yet behind palace doors, insiders whisper that Charlotte's alleged preference exposed a different reality, one in which the emotional future of the crown was moving toward Catherine with a force no title could command. Camilla's household reportedly pushed back quickly, rejecting any suggestion that she was being sidelined or that her interest in Charlotte had ever been anything other than family unity. They allegedly framed the entire matter as overblown, a private phrase twisted into palace drama by those eager to see conflict where there was only misunderstanding. But the problem was that royal power is not measured only by official denials. It is measured by access, rhythm, proximity, and influence. And in the days that followed, William's team quietly reinforced the independence of the Wales household with the kind of careful firmness that leaves no fingerprints but changes everything. Catherine, notably, did not celebrate. That was what made her position even stronger. She issued no triumph, offered no sharp response, and gave no sign that she wanted Camilla publicly weakened. Her silence became its own message. This was not revenge. This was protection. Palace insiders claim Catherine understood that if the moment became a visible victory, Charlotte would again be dragged into the center of it. So Catherine allowed the shift to happen without spectacle, trusting that the palace would understand what had changed even if no one dared to say it aloud. Slowly, the public-facing monarchy seemed to lean more naturally around William, Catherine, and their children, not by announcement, but by gravity. The Wales family carried the image of continuity, youth, discipline, and tomorrow, while Camilla's circle reportedly felt the cold edge of a new order settling around them. Her access to shaping Charlotte's ceremonial narrative became more limited, not as punishment, insiders insist, but as institutional correction. And that correction was devastating, because it suggested the palace had made its choice without making a sound. And as the palace absorbed the shock, one truth became impossible to ignore: Charlotte's alleged choice had revealed where the monarchy's future was already gathering strength. By the end, the alleged declaration was no longer just a sentence. It became a warning, a prophecy, and a mirror held up to the entire House of Windsor. Charlotte had not chosen glamour over duty, nor rebellion over respect. She had chosen the crown she watched being earned every day, the crown of her mother. And that is what made the palace tremble. Because in royal life, the most dangerous truths are often spoken by those who do not yet understand their full power. Charlotte's alleged words were not a political attack. They were not a calculated insult. They were something far harder to dismiss: a child's instinctive recognition of where dignity lived, where patience had been proven, and where the monarchy's emotional future was already beginning to gather. Catherine did not need to seize attention. She did not need to challenge Camilla openly. Her strength had been built through years of restraint, quiet endurance, and unwavering devotion to the role waiting ahead. William's protection of Charlotte, insiders suggest, became more than a father's response. It became a preview of his future kingship. He was drawing a line around the next generation, making clear that the children of Wales would not be shaped by old rivalries, soft pressure, or competing palace circles. Charlotte's future would belong to the direct line, to the discipline of duty, and to the values Catherine had carried without complaint. That decision sent a chilling message through the palace. The crown may still rest in the present, but its emotional command was already moving toward the future. Camilla, by contrast, was left in a painful position. She still had rank. She still had title. She still had her place beside King Charles. But Catherine held something more difficult to measure and far harder to take away: trust. And in the monarchy, trust is the invisible jewel no coronation can manufacture. It is earned slowly, protected fiercely, and recognized instinctively by those who will inherit the burden after everyone else has faded from the center of power. Queen Elizabeth II's legacy seemed to hover over the entire moment, not as a memory of grandeur, but as a standard of restraint. Duty before desire. The institution before personal pride. The crown not as possession, but as a sacred trust. And through that lens, Charlotte's alleged choice became a generational turning point. The palace may have tried to silence the phrase, soften it, and bury it beneath careful explanations. But it could not silence what it revealed. Because in the end, the crown Charlotte chose was not merely her mother's, it was the future the monarchy could no longer afford to deny. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.